Hello, good morning, and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. These are the topics that we shall be discussing today. But before we start, an update on our NCRT series. As communicated before, in 8 lectures, our endeavor is to comprehensively cover all the important chapters of this book, Indian Constitution at Work, which is a textbook in political science for class 11 students. We have already covered 5 lectures, and today we are going to discuss lecture number 6 that deals with judiciary. So to join this session, come at 6 o'clock live, and we will elaborate this chapter, judiciary, relevant for the civil services examination. And if you're liking the content on this YouTube channel, please like this video as well and subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet, and share the links of these sessions with your friends and fellow aspirants. Let's get started and let's look at topic number 1 on page number 1 of the Delhi edition of the Hindu, relevant for GS paper 2. Karnataka High Court upholds nod for probe against the Chief Minister Siddaramaiah. Now let's understand this newspaper article in great detail. There is one agency which is a government organization called MUDDA, Mysore Urban Development Authority. What is the objective of this organization? Planning and development of Mysore. It also has another objective of ensuring that we meet the housing needs of the underprivileged sections of the society in Mysore. So what is this Mysore Urban Development Authority? A government organization responsible for planning and developing the city called Mysore, and also taking care of the housing needs of the underprivileged people of Mysore. Now this Mudda previously had illegally acquired lands without informing the owners. So to develop the housing needs for the underprivileged, Mudda illegally acquired lands belonging to people without informing them, which means without giving them compensation either. One such tract of land was 3.16 acres of land which belonged to the Chief Minister's wife. The current Chief Minister of Karnataka, Mr. Siddaramaiah's wife. This 3.16 acres of land was illegally acquired by this agency without informing the owner. Then what happened? The year was 2020, when this Mudda, it came up with a land exchange scheme called 50-50. Now that we have acquired your land and we have developed it as well, we will give you 50% of this developed land in exchange of the land that we have illegally acquired from you. And now for this 3.16 acres of land which was illegally acquired by Mudda, some 14 sites were given by this agency to the Chief Minister's wife. Why? Because this was part of the 2020 land exchange scheme, under which 50% of the developed sites will be provided to you in exchange of the 50% of the land which we have illegally acquired. Then what happened? 3 anti-corruption activists approached the governor of Karnataka separately, not together, separately, and flagged that there is a scam. And this scam needs to be investigated, and for that we need your nod, we need your section, we need your sanction. Why? Under section 17A of the Prevention of the Corruption Act 1988, because Mr. Siddaramaiah, as the Chief Minister, is a public servant. Now the question on your mind can be why this sanction is even required. I will address that point slightly later. But when these three anti-corruption activists approached the governor flagging scam, what were their allegations? Their allegation was, number one, that this 3.16 acres of land, this was initially bought by the Chief Minister's brother-in-law in the year 2004. So what? Then the brother-in-law of the Chief Minister gifts this land to the Chief Minister's wife in 2010. So what? The allegation by these three anti-corruption activists is that when this land was bought by the Chief Minister's brother-in-law in 2004, he could not have acquired this land. Why? Because in 2004, prior to the buying of this land by the Chief Minister's brother-in-law, this land was already acquired by Mudda. So how could you have bought this land? Because it was illegally acquired by Mudda. That's number one. Number two, these anti-corruption activists also say that this land could not have been even bought. Even if it was not illegally acquired by Mudda, it could not have been bought by Chief Minister's brother-in-law. Why? Because this land belonged to a Dalit. So what? In Karnataka, there is a law called Karnataka Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Prohibition of Sale of Certain Lands Act of 1978. So what are you saying? I am saying that this dispute is on 3.16 acres of land where there is an allegation of a scam. The three anti-corruption activists, they approached the governor flagging the scam, saying, number one, this land was bought by the Chief Minister's brother-in-law in 2004 and then it was gifted to the Chief Minister's wife in 2010. But our contention is that this land could not have been bought by the Chief Minister's brother-in-law because even before that, it was acquired by Mudda. Although illegally, but acquired by Mudda. So how could you have acquired this land? Number one. Number two, there was a prohibition. You could not have even acquired this land even legally. Why? Because this land was belonging to a Dalit. And in Karnataka, there is a law called Karnataka Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Prohibition of Sale of Certain Lands Act 1978, under which if a land is given to a Dalit by the state, there is a prohibition of the sale of that land. So this land belonged to a Dalit which was gifted by the state, so there was a prohibition. This Dalit could not have sold this land to anybody. Although the Chief Minister says this is wrong, because although this land belonged to the Dalit, but this was not the land gifted by the state. In 1930s, this Dalit man had acquired this land through an auction by paying 100 rupees. So long story short, this land, although belonged to a Dalit, was not gifted by the state. It was acquired by this Dalit man through an auction in 1935 by paying 100 rupees. So this was a legal transfer of land by the Chief Minister's brother-in-law and then gifted to his wife in the year 2010. But amidst all this, why the approval of the governor was required to investigate this under Section 17A of the Prevention of the Corruption Act 1988? What is this section? Listen to me carefully. If there is a public servant and this public servant during the course of the day, during the normal activities that he or she has to perform, they have to take certain decisions. And these decisions are to be taken in their official capacity. can we probe, can we investigate, can we inquire, launch an inquiry against this decision by a public servant when he is discharging his official duty? If a probe is required, for that you need the sanction of a competent authority. Now, which is this competent authority? The authority who can remove this public servant from his office. And this section 17A of the Prevention of the Corruption Act 1988 is meant to be a protection for a civil servant. Because if a civil servant, tomorrow you will become a civil servant, you will take decisions. If for any decision or every decision that you take, you will have this Damocles sword hanging over your head that there can be an inquiry, there can be an investigation, there can be a probe, how will you be in a position to take any decision? For that, there is a protection. That if the allegation against you is genuine, the competent authority will decide whether investigation should take place or not. If the competent authority decides that this complaint against you is false, inaccurate, blatantly lie, then this competent authority will not give the sanction for prosecution, will not give the sanction for investigation. So this is meant to be a protection for a civil servant. And who is the competent authority capable of removing the chief minister from his office? Because the chief minister is a public servant and defined as a public servant under the Prevention of the Corruption Act 1988. Who is the competent authority who is capable of removing chief minister from his office? That individual or institution is the governor. So governor's nod was required to start the investigation into the corruption allegations against the chief minister, because there is this mudda scam or alleged mudda scam. And once this nod is given, it will pave way for the Lokayukta, the anti-corruption ombudsman in different states in India, to investigate the allegations of corruption against the chief minister. Similarly, we have Lokpal at the center. If something of this sort would have happened at the center, Prime Minister would have been allegedly involved in something like this, then the Lokpal would have carried out investigation against the Prime Minister. But you require the prior sanction of the competent authority which is capable of removing you from this office. In this case of Karnataka, it was the governor, and governor gave the sanction. When governor gave the sanction, this matter was taken to the Karnataka High Court by the Chief Minister. Why? And there were three important cases, three important issues that Karnataka High Court had to decide. Issue number one, should the governor entertain a complaint by a private person? So this time, who is filing a complaint before the governor? Three anti-corruption activists, three private persons. These are not public officials. These are not part of the police who could have told the governor that there is an allegation, there is a scam happening in Mudda. So these are private persons. Can the governor sanction prosecution or investigation based on the complaint received by a private person, or it has to be necessarily a public official filing a complaint? This was matter number one that Karnataka High Court had to decide. And Karnataka High Court said, if these private persons, listen to me carefully, if these private persons are not allowed to file a complaint under section 17 capital A of the Prevention of the Corruption Act, then what is the alternative available to them? The alternative is they will approach the police and police will file the FIR. But what was the basic purpose of section 17 capital A? It was meant as a protection for this public official, because the competent authority will get to decide whether this complaint is genuine or false, whether this complaint is vexatious or this complaint is genuine. So what was meant to be a protection for a public servant, this protection will be removed if this private person is allowed to directly approach the police and police will file an FIR, then where is the protection for a civil servant? So in this case, yes, the governor can entertain a complaint by even a private person. That's number one. Number two, look at the title, look at the wording of the section. Section 17, capital A. If the public servant is taking decisions in his official capacity and then there is an alleged scam or there is impropriety or there is corruption, then action should be taken, probe should start, investigation should start. Chief Minister Siddaramaiah says this policy of awarding 14 alternate sites to my wife in exchange of 3.16 acres of land which was illegally acquired by the Mudda. This decision was taken when BJP was in power. So I was not the Chief Minister. I did not assign these 14 alternate sites in exchange of 3.16 acres of illegal land which was acquired by Mudda. So I am not taking a decision. When I am not taking a decision in my official capacity, how can you instigate a probe against me under this section, because it deals with actions by a public servant in their official capacity? The court said, look at the facts of this case. When in 2004, your brother-in-law acquired this land, at that time you were the Deputy Chief Minister. In 2017, when these 14 alternate sites for compensation were earmarked, identified by Mudda, at that time your son was the ex officio member of Mudda. So which means if such a case does not merit investigation, we can't understand then what sort of case would merit an investigation. Because this deserves an investigation. We are not saying you're corrupt. We are not saying that you are guilty, but this deserves at least an investigation. Let the investigation take place. An important question number 3. When these 3 anti-corruption activists approached the governor seeking nod to probe allegations of corruption against Chief Minister Siddaramaiah, the entire Council of Ministers, headed by the Chief Minister, gave an advice to the governor that, dear governor, don't give them nod, don't give them approval. And we know Constitution says there shall be Council of Ministers headed by the Chief Minister to aid and advise the governor, who shall act on that advice. And this advice on the governor is binding if it is given by the Council of Ministers. So despite the fact that this advice was given by Council of Ministers to the governor, this advice was disregarded by the governor. Governor went against this advice and gave prosecution nod, investigation nod to the Lokayukta. The petition before the Karnataka High Court claimed that governors could not have given this sanction because the Council of Ministers advised him against it. But the Karnataka High Court said there can be an element of bias in the advice given by the Council of Ministers, because Chief Minister is appointed by the governor, and only on the advice of the Chief Minister other Council of Ministers are appointed by the governor. So which means those ministers who gave advice to the governor not to prosecute, not to give sanction, they have bias because their ministryship is dependent upon the confidence of the Chief Minister. This advice tendered by Council of Ministers is binding on the governor except in extraordinary circumstances. And what we are witnessing right now is an extraordinary circumstance where there is an explicit possibility of a bias in this advice given by the Council of Ministers to the governor. Now the investigation will take place. Possibly an FIR will be filed. There will be a political pressure on the Chief Minister to quit. And if he quits, because you would be aware that there is a power tussle between the Chief Minister and his Deputy Chief Minister, Mr. D.K. Shivkumar. Will that lead to a change of guard in Karnataka with D.K. Shivkumar becoming the Chief Minister? That remains to be seen. Let's watch out for what is happening in Karnataka. But that is what you need to understand from this newspaper article on page number 1. Is that clear? Let's look at something again on page number 1, relevant for GS paper 3. We want answers, says the Supreme Court, seeking report on stubble burning. From whom? From Air Quality Management, the Commission for Air Quality Management. But for this, we need to understand what is this stubble burning, which is what causes, or the allegation is that this is what causes pollution, particularly in Delhi. So in Delhi, pollution may not be entirely because of the firecrackers being burst during the festival of Diwali. It is primarily because of the stubble burning, which is happening in the neighboring states of Delhi, in the neighborhood of the national capital, Punjab, Haryana, Western UP. But what is the stubble burning? Listen to me carefully. Paddy season is over. Paddy has been sown. Now paddy needs to be harvested. Clear? When paddy needs to be harvested, which primarily means it will leave a stubble. And this problem of stubble is particularly found in areas where combined harvesting is employed. And in combined harvesting, we use a machine called combines. These combines are used for harvesting. What these combines do, they not only separate the grain, but also clean the grain at once. So paddy has been sown, now you need to harvest it, and for that what are the tools available? Either you will go for manual harvesting, which means you will use sickle or knives to harvest the paddy, or you will go for mechanically using combines. And what these combines will do, they not only separate the grain, they also clean the grain all at once. But the problem with these combines is they do not cut close to the ground. That means it's a machine, but it does not cut close to the ground. It does not uproot, which ultimately leaves a stubble. And now we need to clean this stubble, clear the stubble. Why? Because we need to prepare this land for the next crop, and this next crop is wheat. Long story short, paddy season is over. We need to harvest the paddy. How do we do that? Either mechanically using knives and sickles, or we employ machines known as combines. What these combines will do, they will separate the grain and they will clean the grain all at once. But the problem here is that these combines do not cut close to the ground, which means they will leave a stubble. Now we need to clean this ground, clean this land. Why? Because we need to prepare this land for the next crop, which is wheat. What is the easiest way of cleaning this ground? Burn it. And this is what we call stubble burning. And this stubble burning, ultimately smoke, and smoke knows no boundaries. It travels multiple places, and this is what causes pollution in Delhi, which affects the lives of individuals, particularly the children. For example, last year, Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul had said, time has come to do something yesterday. Not today, yesterday. So we are already late. We are playing with the lives of elderly as well as children in Delhi because of this menace of air pollution. Delhi is becoming unlivable, and one part of that is the stubble burning, which is taking place in Punjab, Haryana and Western UP. particularly in areas where combine harvesting is used, basically employing machines known as combines. But sir, what is the alternative? We just can't look at the problem. We have to find an alternative solution. And what is the alternative to stubble burning? Instead of burning, what can we do to clean this land for the next crop, which is wheat? We can employ turbo happy seeders. Now, what is this turbo happy seeder? It's basically a machine which is mounted on a tractor. A machine which is mounted on a tractor. But the beauty about this turbo happy seeder is it not only harvests the crop, it also uproots it, it also drills the land, so that you don't have to worry about stubble because it leaves no stubble. It harvests, it uproots from roots, and ultimately what happens? It also drills the ground. When it drills the ground, that means now you are ready to sow wheat on this land. This is the alternative to stubble burning. Instead of burning, employ turbo happy seeders, which is a machine mounted on a tractor. Your job is done very quickly because it will not only uproot, it will also drill the land, and now you can sow wheat. But sir, if such a simple solution is there, why are the farmers not taking recourse to the solution? Because the problem, my dear, is that it is costly. It costs more than a lakh to buy this turbo happy seeder. So I, as a farmer, a small marginal farmer, why should I spend 1 lakh rupees on buying a machine where I can do the same thing simply by burning the stubble? Disregarding whatever happens to the air quality, I don't care, I have to take care of myself. And instead of turbo happy seeder, I will simply burn the stubble because it is expensive, because it is costly. Then sir, for this also we need a solution? Yes. And what is the solution? Uberization of agriculture. You don't need to buy your own car to travel places. Simply open your Uber, select a ride. If the driver does not cancel it, maybe after 10, 12 cancellations, and then the driver asking you on call, sir, are you paying by cash or card? But you will get an Uber ride, which means you don't have to own your car. Can we not have a simple, similar solution to turbo happy seeders where private companies can come in, will employ these turbo happy seeders, and will give these THS on rent to the farmers so that they don't have to spend 1 lakh rupee for buying on their own this turbo happy seeder? That is solution number 1, Uberization of agriculture. There is another solution. Is there a use for this stubble? Use in the sense, instead of burning the stubble, can we find an alternate use of stubble so that the farmers are encouraged, instead of setting stubble on fire, it may sell stubble? Yes. What are the alternative uses of stubble? Can be used for making beds for cattle, can be used for thatching. For example, you can make the rooftops of your houses in rural areas because of the material, from the material of stubble. We can use it for producing biomass, which can further be used to produce electricity. That is the solution to this problem of stubble burning. So, if stubble burning is an issue, particularly in this winter season upcoming in Delhi and northern India, where because of the smog, it leads to a lot of health problems, particularly for those who are facing asthma, bronchitis, and other ailments, particularly children. Then for that, what we need to solve this problem of stubble burning by either employing turbo-happy seeders or subsidizing turbo-happy seeders for the farmers, or resorting to the Uberization of agriculture, or we will have to find alternatives to the use of stubble, which can be used for making beds for the cattle, which can be used for thatching, which can be used for producing biomass, which in fact can be further used for producing electricity. That's how we can solve this problem. Clear? Okay. Let's look at another column, a break from the past, a new beginning in Sri Lanka. And this is something that we have discussed previously, but couple of points here and then we are done with this article. What is democracy? Democracy is rule by the people through their representatives, indirect democracy. And how do we choose these representatives? Through a process called elections. One important statement that is mentioned in this column, which you can use for your answers, possibly essays as well. Sometimes these elections, they produce magic. And this magic was produced recently in Sri Lanka. When Sri Lanka gained independence in 1948, from 1948 till now, it has been ruled by the elites of Colombo. It has been ruled by those who are Western educated. Those people who rise from the ground, they were never able to capture power in Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka was always ruled by the elites of Colombo, Western educated, so on and so forth, and political dynasties as well. For example, the Rajapaksa family. And now this election, which was conducted free and fair, it produced a magic, and this time an individual, AKD, Anurag Kumara Dissanayake, became the president of Sri Lanka. And this person was not an ordinary person. Ordinary, yes, but extraordinary in a different sense. He had a Marxist leaning. So the economic disparity in Sri Lanka, the problems faced by the localites in Sri Lanka, the corruption in Sri Lanka, the blatant disregard to the voices, demands, aspirations and grievances of the localites in Sri Lanka, it had produced these elites since 1948. And this is where leftist movement erupted in Sri Lanka in 1970s. When an organization was formed, and that organization was JVP. But it was following the ideology of Karl Marx, it was following the ideology of the Mao of China. Basically revolutionary in their outlook, because they wanted to overthrow the corrupt system in Colombo and wanted to make people's power supreme. But not everything can be done through revolution, even if it is violent. In 2019, National People's Party was formed. And this was formed from JVP. So from JVP, some people took a political step. That means an election front was created, and this person, AKD, rose through the ranks and is now a commoner but the president of Sri Lanka. But there are some concerns. Concerns as mentioned in this article by the professor. And he says that even if he has won the election, but he has still got the majority votes from the dominant Buddhist Sinhala majority. So the Tamils and the Muslims in the northern and eastern part of Sri Lanka, they have not voted for him. And now what he needs to do is to form an inclusive government. Because his party does not have the majority in the parliament. In a sense, parliamentary election has to take place. So very soon we will see the parliament being dissolved in Sri Lanka and parliamentary elections will be carried out, will be conducted. And there lies the challenge for the president, whether he can elicit the support of the minorities and the Tamils and Muslim minorities in Sri Lanka. That is going to be a challenge. And then two other tasks that are very urgent for this new president. One, he has to repay the external debt, because when there were economic crises in 2020, 21, 22 in Sri Lanka, which forced the Gotabaya Rajapaksa to resign, and then because of that economic turmoil, IMF came into the picture and provided monetary support to Sri Lanka. For that, what this new government has to do, it has to repay that external debt. That should be task number one. And task number two, the corruption, the scourge of corruption that was happening in Sri Lanka. Although corruption cannot be eradicated in one day. In his election speeches, he promised eradication of corruption, but that is okay in an election speech. But in reality, corruption has been institutionalized. And to resolve this problem, to sack this menace, genuine efforts must be made by the president to rid Sri Lanka of corruption. Because this corruption used to be a startling feature of these elites who captured power in Sri Lanka since 1948. And now a departure from that, a magic which developed in these elections. For that, this new president has his task cut out. He has to address corruption urgently. That's about this column. Let's look at another editorial. It is an offense. And this is something that I think we discussed yesterday. But briefly, I will summarize this. If you have already attended my lecture yesterday, then you can skip this portion. We will discuss something else later. But those who have joined for the first time, listen to me carefully for 5 to 6 minutes. I will summarize what this editorial is all about, because it says something interesting, something important, which we did not cover yesterday. A 28-year-old man in Tamil Nadu, he was accused of downloading 2 child pornographic videos. Matter went to the Madras High Court. Madras High Court quashed the proceedings against this man. Why? Madras High Court said mere possession of child pornographic material or videos is not a crime, unless and until you are creating this child pornographic content, you are circulating this child pornographic content, you are transmitting this child pornographic content, you are using this child pornographic content for commercial gains. That is a crime under Protection of Children from the Sexual Offences Act, POCSO. This law was enacted by the Parliament in 2012. Matter went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said no. Even mere possession is a crime. How? The Supreme Court invoked the doctrine of constructive possession. Because yesterday we discussed this doctrine, but we did not elaborate this. You may be asked about what is this doctrine of constructive possession. The Supreme Court said, imagine it, that there is a person A who is only watching child pornographic content. Only watching. He is not downloading it, he is not sharing it, he is not transmitting it, he is not re-uploading it, he is just watching. But despite that, we can say that you are in possession of this content. Why? Because you have now the power over this content. What you can do, you can share it, you can distribute it, you can even utilize it for commercial gains. So because by invoking this doctrine of constructive possession, we can say even if you are only watching content online, which is child pornographic in nature, you are in possession of that content, which means you are possessing that content, which is a crime under POCSO, Section 15 of POCSO. The Supreme Court further said that if you will send me a child pornographic content, you will send me the link of this child pornographic content. Even if I close this link, but I'm not deleting this link, I'm not destroying this link, and I'm not informing the authorities, the police, that here is this child pornographic content which needs to be pulled down. Here is this person who is transmitting, sharing a child pornographic content. If I'm not deleting this link, destroying this link and informing the authorities, which means what? I have the intention of committing crime. And what is that intention of committing a crime? That means I may have the intention of further transmitting this video, further sending and sharing this video, or gaining commercials out of this video. And that is what the Supreme Court said yesterday. These are inchoate offences. That means offences that you are perpetrating in preparation of a further crime. But Supreme Court further said that we should not call it child pornography. Where is it mentioned here? We should not call it child pornography. Why? Because pornography mostly gives a sense that it is through consent of two adults, but children cannot give consent. So we should not trivialize this concept of child pornography. And instead, what is the term that we should use? We should use the term called child sexual exploitative and abuse material, CSEAM. But court further said, and that is the point I need to highlight towards the end of this editorial. It has advised the government, the dear government, what you should do, you should implement a comprehensive sex education programs so that we can teach children the legal and ethical ramifications of child pornography. It is not only illegal to possess this child pornographic content, but it is also unethical. And how do we teach this to the kids? For that, we need to comprehensively update our sex education programs in schools and educational institutions. That is what you need to understand from this editorial. It is an offense. Now let's look at another column written by the current chairman of the UGC, University Grants Commission. Previously, he was the Vice Chancellor of the Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU, Delhi, Professor Jagadish Kumar. Now listen to me carefully. It talks about national credits framework or national credit framework, which is considered to be an important aspect of the new national education policy of 2020. And this national credit framework is currently will be implemented in higher educational institutions. The standard operating procedure has already been devised and designed by the University Grants Commission. But the idea is to implement this throughout our education system, whether it is school education, higher education, secondary education, in all the levels of our education, we should implement this national credit framework. And what is this national credit framework? Listen to me carefully. This is national credit framework. And the other thing that we need to understand is the academic bank of credit. You are in school and every year you spend number of hours learning, relearning, unlearning, then taking the exam, and ultimately after that you get a certificate. Clear? But what about the time that you have spent in extracurricular activities? What about the time that you may have spent on vocational training? What about the time that you may have spent on skill development? What about the time that you may have spent on internships? What about the time that you may have spent on sports? What about the time that you may have spent on yoga? What about the time that you may have spent on NCC? Only your academic performance is credited, is given its recognition, is given its due. What about other co-curricular, extracurricular, vocational skill development exercises? That is completely disregarded in our current system. But if we have to make our country the leading country of the world, not just in terms of economy, but in terms of the quality of the people that we produce, the intellectual capacity of the people, the technological prowess of the people. I was reading an Outlook magazine, I think it was in the year 2007. And there was a beautiful article written. I still remember that article. It said, it takes a lifetime to teach a butcher how to cut the mutton right. So the world that we need requires electricians as well, plumbers as well, carpenters as well. We need skills. Skill development. Way back in 2007 article of Outlook focused upon it. And in our current educational framework, we only focus on rote learning. We regurgitate the facts, formulas, and produce them for good grades. We rarely ask why or why not. We study, but only for the exams. We study, but whatever is mentioned in the syllabus. We never question beyond our course requirements. But that is not what education is all about. And for education, we need overall development of mind, body, and soul. And for that, we need to provide emphasis on the extracurricular activities as well. But on top of that, you may be in art stream, but you may also want to explore coding. You may be in commerce, but you may also want to update your skills when it comes to, let's say, handicrafts, carpentry. Depending upon your likes, of course, nobody is going to force you. And for every such skill, there should be credits. And all these credits will get deposited in the academic bank of credit. And the credits that you get will determine your credit level as well. So what are you saying? I am saying, for example, you are in grade 5. And for that, the credit level is 1. If you are in grade 8, for that the credit level is 2. If you are in grade 10, for that credit level is 3. If you are, let's say, doing graduation, but this graduation is of 3 years, your credit level is 5.5. If you are doing graduation and the graduation is of 4 years, your credit level is 6. And the highest it goes up to is for the PhD, where the credit level is 8. Now imagine a situation. This national credit framework, it tells us about that in a particular year, how many hours of learning do you require? And it varies from class to class, but on an average, 1200 notional hours of learning. And for that you will get 40 credits. Which means after every year, when you have consumed these hours, when you have learned over these hours, there will be an assessment. Once you, basically an exam. And once you clear that exam, you will be given those credits, and the credits will determine what is the credit level that you will have. And these credits will get deposited in the academic bank of credit. Imagine a situation that I am in class 5, but then somehow I have to drop out of the school. And after 3 years or 2 years or 4 years, I decide to join the school back. Do I need to go to class 6th and then pass it, then go to 7th, then go to 8th? Or I can go for bridge courses. Because every course you take, whether it is online course, because national education policy It focuses on blended learning. It focuses on hybrid learning. It, for the first time, talks about the power that can be unleashed by the online learning. Because you may be driving a rickshaw in the morning over the weekends, but you may also be doing an online course. You may be doing an online degree as well. For that also there will be credit system. Although there is credit system for online open schooling as well, but that is not found in the schools and in other educational institutions. Now, the best thing about this national credits framework would be that all the educational institutions will have to accept it, which means I may be studying, or let's come back. If I am in the 5th standard, I dropped out of the school, but if I want to go back to the school, for that I don't need to go through class 6, 7, 8. I can take bridge courses, because for every course there will be credits, then there will be assessment. Once I clear that examination, I will get the credit. So basis that credit, I may think that now I am at credit level 8. That means I have already crossed 8th standard. That means now I can get admission in the 9th standard. Credit system. Similarly, I am in a university pursuing MA in history. Can I also explore other courses? For every such course, I will be given the credit after the assessment, and I can use them in the academic, I can get them in the academic bank of credit. And then this credit system will tell me whether I can take admission in another university for another course. So there are multiple exits and entry points because of this national credit framework. I can exit at any point in time from a university, because by that time, if I'm in my first year of post-graduation and I drop out, if I have to re-enter the university, I have to take the entrance exam again. But now that won't be the case, because I will have the credit and I can directly jump to another semester in that post-graduation course. Or I can go to another university. Or even the online courses, skill development, even my internship will be factored in, credits will be provided, and that credits will determine my credit level. This is currently in place for higher educational institutions, but it is argued that it should be implemented for all the educational institutions in this country, whether it comes to school education, whether it comes to middle, elementary, higher education, or even the higher educational institutions. This is going to be a far-reaching reform in our education system, so that we are producing people with skills, so that you can have interdisciplinarity as well. It's not that a student of arts will only know about history, political science and geography. He may also know about coding. She may also know about some other areas of skill development, whether it is human resources, whether it is data science and others. That interdisciplinarity and this multiple exit and entry points, it's an important feature of our national education policy, and that has been praised by the UGC chairperson. Let's look at another article. Good beginning, says India. For the first time, United Nations document mentions that there should be a Security Council reform. United Nations, you would know, after the fall of the League of Nations, after the Second World War, the world got together and created this global body called United Nations. And the principal objective of United Nations is to prevent a third world war. Principal objective of the United Nations is to ensure there is peace around the globe. Whether it has achieved that objective or it has failed spectacularly, that is another debate. But in United Nations, the most important organ is the United Nations Security Council. And this United Nations Security Council has 5 permanent members. And these 5 permanent members have the veto powers. And which are these 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council? There is US, there is UK, there is Russia, there is France, and then there is China. Critics argue, we in India, we also argue, and we have been batting for United Nations Security Council reform for a long time. In fact, United States have also said that we support India's entry into United Nations Security Council. Other countries have also said the same thing. But even then, this reform has not taken place. That means the composition of this United Nations Security Council has not been expanded to meet the existing reality. Because the composition, it reflects the reality of 1945. It does not reflect the reality of today. What is the reality of today? India is the third most powerful country on the planet after United States and China. Yet India is not part of the United Nations Security Council. What about countries such as Japan, Germany? Japan and Germany could not get admission into United Nations Security Council as permanent members because they were the losers in the Second World War. And whoever was victorious in the First World War, they became part of the United Nations Security Council. What about countries such as Brazil? What about countries such as South Africa? In fact, if you look at the composition of this United Nations Security Council, Latin America is not represented. Africa is not represented. What we call the global south, the underdeveloping or developing countries, which are not part of the Northern America or Asian countries, for example, South Korea, Japan. These countries are not represented in United Nations Security Council. So it is time to revamp it. And India deserves its rightful place on this high security table of United Nations Security Council. In fact, one professor of Singapore, who was also a former diplomat, Professor Kishore Madhubani or Mabubani. What he says, interesting point which you can write in your answers. He says Great Britain should give up and hand over its UNSC permanent post to India. Who says this? Former diplomat, professor from Singapore, Professor Kishore Mahbubani. What he says, it says Great Britain should give up its permanent position on the United Nations Security Council and give it to India. Why? Because he says Great Britain is no longer great. Number one. Number two, it has not used its veto powers in decades. So basically, for the lack of a better term, Professor Kishore is saying that Great Britain is a useless entity in United Nations Security Council because this Great Britain is no longer great and it has not used its veto power for political reasons for many decades now. So it should give up its claim, it should give up its post in UNSC and hand it over to India. What happens in the future? How will the UNSC be reformed? Whether its composition will reflect the reality of existing world, that we will have to wait and watch. But it is a good beginning according to India that for the first time a UN summit document mentions the need for reform of United Nations Security Council. That's what you need to understand from this topic. Let's look at another column, why the fact-checking unit was invalidated. Again, this is something that we have covered a couple of days ago, but briefly we will summarize this. If you have already attended this session and you don't need to know about this further, you can skip. The rest may continue. Why the fact-checking unit was invalidated. 2023 IT rules were amended, and these IT rules provided for fact-check unit under Press Information Bureau. And what is a Press Information Bureau? It is the media and publicity arm of the Government of India, which comes under the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. And it is not that this fact-check unit was created for the first time recently. It has been in existence since November 2019. But what was the purpose and what this fact-checking unit was doing? What it was doing, it was flagging content as either false, fake, or misleading. False and fake, although they are used interchangeably, but there is a subtle difference. False may also be innocent. Today's class will not be conducted on Unacademy. I may say this innocently, but it turns out it's false. Tomorrow class will be conducted. But there is something called fake, where there is deliberate intention of mischief. For example, this fact-checking unit, it flags content, whether it is WhatsApp forward, Instagram post, tweets, content on various websites as either false, fake, or misleading. For example, a WhatsApp forward which says Modi government will give 3 months of free recharge to all mobile subscribers. This fact-check unit of PIB said this is fake. Or something misleading. For example, Al Jazeera posted that Anti-Muslim Citizenship Amendment Act has been enacted by the parliament. Rules have been made. It is not anti-Muslim. It's just that we are providing fast-track citizenship to the religious minorities of 3 countries in our neighborhood, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh. How is it anti-Muslim? So fact-check unit of PIB says this is misleading. But that was the only job of this fact-check unit. False, flagging content as either false, fake, or misleading. But because of these 2023 rules, legal mechanism was provided to fact-check unit. And what is this legal mechanism? If I am posting any content, whether it is defamatory, contempt of court, whatever it is, whether it is hate speech, I am posting it on Facebook or Twitter, or I still call it Twitter because that's the good name. Mr. Musk now says, should we go back to Twitter instead of X? But whether that happens or not, that's a separate matter. Plus, I'm not on Twitter. But the point is, will Twitter or Facebook or WhatsApp be held responsible, legally accountable for what the users are posting on their platforms? No. And that is what we call safe harbor protection. But because of these 2023 rules, this fact-check unit, once it flags a content as either false, fake, or misleading, it will give 36 hours to these social media networking sites to take down this content. If you will not, then you will lose the safe harbor protection, which means you will lose your immunity, which means then you will be prosecuted. Kunal Kamra and others, comedian, satirist Kunal Kamra and others approached the Bombay High Court. Bombay High Court gave a split verdict this year. One judge said it is legal. Just because members of this fact-check unit will be appointed by the government, that does not mean they will not have independence to independently decide whether the content is false, fake, or misleading. Because this judge says, listen to me carefully, this fact-check unit has the role to flag content as either false, fake, misleading, only when it comes to the central government business. One judge says, who has the best information about its own business? That's the central government. And if somebody is saying that their trains are not running on time, it is the job of the central government to present facts and say this is a fake tweet or this is a misleading content. Because if tomorrow you have to mention me in 50 words, I should have the responsibility of saying, no, what you're saying is wrong because I have the full information about myself. Similarly, this judge says, since government and this fact check unit of the PIB will only focus on flagging information relating to the central government business, not something else. Something else is freedom of speech and expression. Relating to government business, we have the responsibility to tell you what is correct position. The other judge said, no, it is a classic example of censorship. Because then the central government will be the judge in its own case to decide what is fake, false, misleading about itself. And this amounts to self-censorship. And this amounts to have chilling effect. And this is what we call another important doctrine called doctrine of chilling effect. What is this doctrine of chilling effect? I'll give a hypothetical example. For example, you are in a school. You are in class 5. 40 students in the class. One student gets up, ma'am or sir, I did not understand the way you taught this topic. Could you please explain this? Ma'am or sir, the way you taught this concept is incorrect. I am going to tell you what is correct. What this sir or ma'am will do, come here, will use a cane and will start beating this child. And now the 39 other students, they are witnessing. And what will you do? How will you react? You will be under immense pressure. Which means somebody is being caned. Your heart will shiver. And what will happen because of that? Tomorrow you will not question the teacher. You will not ask a difficult question to the teacher. This is what we call chilling effect. As the writers of English language previously would use, it sends shivers down my spine. Although this phrase you should no longer use in your writings, because if you attend a writing workshop, there you are taught what are the modern ways of writing. And these terms such as once upon a time, sends shivers down my spine. This is something which is not encouraged to write because we don't use it now. Although there are people who still use it, but if there is a good writer, he or she will tell you, you should not use these sentences or phrases. But be that as it may, this is what we call the doctrine of chilling effect. And the other judge said, this will have the chilling effect on freedom of speech, because then others will not be able to post anything, which means then it amounts to violation of freedom of speech and expression, because the government can take action against you. And in fact, these terms, false, fake, misleading, they are vague, they are not defined. So what is false, what is fake, what is misleading, without proper definition, it is liable to be misused. And Constitution under Article 19(1)(a) gives you the freedom of speech and expression. But on the other hand, under Article 19 Clause 2 imposes restrictions as well. But restrictions are on various grounds. Grounds of 8 grounds mentioned in the Constitution: sovereignty and integrity of India, security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, morality or decency, contempt of court, defamation, incitement to an offence. There is no such ground on the basis of which your freedom of speech and expression can be restricted, such as whether this is true or false. There is your truth, there is my truth. So far as the only truth and the absolute truth is concerned, it does not exist, according to writer Amish Tripathi. So the fact is, just because a statement, an expression is false, that does not justify its taking down. But when these two judges disagreed with each other, ultimately a third judge had to be appointed by the Bombay High Court, tiebreaker judge. And this tiebreaker judge also ruled that this fact check unit is unconstitutional. Now, according to this article, the union government is likely to appeal before the Supreme Court against the decision of the Bombay High Court. Clear? Let's look at one more section that I've added today, watch out. Watch out in the sense, Supreme Court considers pleas on sub-quota classification. In Devinder Singh versus State of Punjab, a 7-judge bench of the Supreme Court ruled that sub-classification of SCs and STs is permissible. and states can also subclassify SCs and STs. There is a lot of hue and cry on this judgment, and ultimately review petitions have been filed in the Supreme Court. Although 4 judges also said that there should be creamy layer application of SCs and STs, but that was only part of obiter dicta. That was not part of the judgment, that was the observation of the judges. It was not part of the operative part of the judgment. But be that as it may, review petition has been filed, and for that you need to know that this review petition should be filed within 30 days of the judgment. So if the judgment was given by the court today and you want to review, you want to file a review petition against this judgment, you can do that within 30 days of the judgment. And this review petition will then be heard by the same judges who heard this case before. And then they will have to decide whether to accept or reject this review petition. And this review petition is accepted or rejected on 2 grounds. Ground number 1, if new facts have emerged in this case, or if an error has been pointed out. If the petitioners file a review petition before the court arguing that new facts have emerged in this case which you did not consider in your judgment, or we are pointing out an error in your judgment, this should not have been the judgment because you have violated your previous judgment, whatever the error. If court agrees, the same judges agree, then they will review this verdict. Otherwise, this review petition is dismissed. Now, what the Supreme Court is doing, these 7 judges, they are examining these review petitions. But whether these review petitions will be accepted or rejected, we will have to watch out. And then we will have an elaborate discussion. What is the impact of the acceptance or the rejection of these mercy petitions? Now, 2 questions for your practice, and after that I will take some of your questions. If you have any questions to ask me, after that I will take your questions, so stay with me. Stubble burning in India has emerged as a significant environmental and public health issue, especially in the northern states. Critically analyze the causes and impacts of stubble burning and suggest effective measures that can be taken by the government to address this problem. Number 1. Number 2, the National Credit Framework seeks to integrate academic and vocational education across all levels in India. Discuss the key features of the NCrF and critically examine how it can transform the Indian education system in terms of employability and skill development. If you have any questions, let me know. What if an individual isn't aware if such an activity needs to be reported to the concerned authorities or if it's punishable under Section 15 of POCSO? That is why the Supreme Court advised the central government what you need to do. You need to have comprehensive sex education programs. You need to tell the kids. And at the same time, just because you're not aware that there is a law, there is a penal provision, that doesn't mean you are not a criminal. CAG acts as the friend, philosopher and guide of the Public Accounts Committee. Okay, that's about it. Do not forget to press the like button if you have liked this session. See you again today, 6 p.m. with the NCRT series. Till then, have a great time. All the best. Bye-bye.